Good morning, boys and girls. Thank you for joining with me on this, the fourth Sunday of Easter season. It sure feels like spring has hit us again this weekend after a few days of winter time and snow again in the third week of April. But here we are, and we're continuing. We're going to finish the second half of the story that I started last week. Remember, the story is called The Priest with the Dirty Clothes. And we ended last week, halfway through the story, where the priest got back and he was trying to clean his muddy clothes, but he was having no success at all. In fact, it says the more he tried to clean his clothes, the worse they looked. And here we pick it up today. The clothes, they were so dirty, they looked like his old scratchy brown robe. The next day, Jonathan took his special clothes to the town cleaner, the fuller. The fuller was a man who cleaned people's dirty clothes. He had special soaps that could get mud out of clothing. The fuller looked at Jonathan's clothes and said, "These clothes are so dirty. I don't know if I can make them clean, but I'll do my best. Come back tomorrow." When Jonathan returned to the fuller's shop tomorrow, the fuller said, "I'm afraid that I cannot make your clothes clean. They are ruined forever. The only thing you can do is get some new clothes." "But I can't get new clothes," Jonathan said. "These clothes were given to me by the bishop. He only gives out one set of clothes." "I'm sorry about that," the fuller said, "but there is nothing more I can do. You should go to see the bishop. Maybe he can give you a new set of clothes so you can preach before the king." Jonathan didn't think the bishop would give him a new set of clothes, but he had to ask. So he went straight to the bishop's office. And the bishop patiently listened to Jonathan's story, and then he said, this is a sad thing that's happened to you, Jonathan, but there's nothing I can do to help you." Jonathan was very sad. "Isn't there something I can do to get clean clothes?" he asked. "Please let me do something special to earn new clothes, new clean clothes." The bishop's face was sad. "No, Jonathan," he said. "The rules are clear. There's nothing you can do on your own to earn a new set of clothes. The only person who can help you is the great prince. Perhaps you should speak to him." The bishop gave Jonathan the directions to the palace of the great prince. Jonathan carefully followed the directions until he came to the palace where the great prince lived. He asked a guard for permission to see the prince, and the guard escorted Jonathan to the great hall where the prince was sitting on his throne. When Jonathan saw the prince, he was amazed. The prince was dressed in a long purple robe with precious jewels on it. There was a band around his waist made of pure gold. His face seemed to shine like the sun. Jonathan had never seen anyone like him. The prince looked at Jonathan with caring eyes. "Why are you here?" he asked in a voice that was soft and kind. "What do you need from me?" Jonathan said, "Oh, great prince, I'm a new priest. I am to preach a sermon to the king's household, but I've ruined my clothes and I can't stand in front of the king without clean clothes. And no one has been able to make my clothes clean. Is there anything you can do to help me?" Jonathan told the prince how his clothes had become dirty. The prince listened quietly and then said to Jonathan, "I understand your problem and I can help you." "Are you going to give me new clean clothes?" Jonathan asked. "You will soon see, Jonathan," the prince replied. "But first, come with me to the fireplace." So Jonathan followed the prince to the corner of the room where a small fire was burning in the fireplace. The prince pointed to a small branch at the edge of the fire. The branch had been partly burned, but it was no longer hot. The prince told Jonathan to pick up that branch. Jonathan reached out and picked up the branch. He held it and looked at it. It was black and charred. And when the prince said Jonathan could put it down again, Jonathan put it back beside the fire. And then the prince said, "Now, look at your hands." Jonathan looked down and saw that his hand was black. It was covered with soot from the branch. "Jonathan," said the prince, "you are like the branch you pulled from the fire, covered with dirt. But the dirt isn't just on your clothes, it's in your heart. Sin, the wrong things that you do, makes your heart dirty. No soap can make it clean." But then the prince said, "Jonathan, I can help you. Go to the castle next week and be ready to preach your sermon. But wear your dirty clothes. I will take care of them." Jonathan felt sad and afraid. "But great prince," he said, "the king said I could not stand in front of him in my dirty clothes. And the evil magician Malice will do something mean to me if I enter the castle wearing my dirty clothes." A warm smile spread across the face of the great prince. "Yes, Jonathan, I know all about Malice and his meanness," he said. "I also know the king very well. You see, Jonathan, the king is my father." Jonathan asked, "How are you going to make my clothes clean?" The prince answered, "I promise you that I will take care of that, and I never break my promises. I always do what I say I will do. So go home and get ready for your sermon. I'll be there, and I will do what I promised." When the next week came, Jonathan was both excited and a little bit afraid. He thought about not going to the castle at all. Then he remembered the promise the prince had made to him. "I will trust in the promise of the prince. I will go to the castle," he said to himself. Jonathan went outside and got on his horse. This time the day was bright with sunshine. There were no storm clouds in the sky. Jonathan had no trouble making the journey to the castle. When he got there, he could see a crowd of people going in. But Jonathan swallowed hard and walked inside to the place where he was to stand and preach. But just as soon as Jonathan took up his position, Malice stood up and shouted, "May bad things happen to you, O priest! You're still wearing your dirty clothes." The king looked at Jonathan and frowned. "Why are you here again in your dirty clothes?" the king asked. "I told you that you could not stand in front of me looking like that." And Jonathan felt ashamed. His face turned red. He couldn't even answer the king. The people began to whisper. Some shouted loudly, "Go away!" But at that moment, someone came into the room. There was a man dressed in scratchy brown robe, exactly like the robe Jonathan wore under his special clothes. And the man was carrying a present under his arm. At first, no one recognized the stranger. Then someone shouted, "It's the great prince!" Malice didn't know what to think. He asked, "What is the meaning of this? Why are you here? And why are you wearing that itchy brown robe?" The prince didn't answer. He was smiling as he walked to the front of the room and stood next to Jonathan. Then the prince handed Jonathan the present and told him to open it. Everyone watched Jonathan as he carefully opened the gift that the prince had given to him. Jonathan's eyes grew wide when he saw what it was. It was the perfect present. Inside were the beautiful clothes that belonged to the prince. The prince smiled again at Jonathan and said, "These are the clean clothes that I promised you. They are yours now forever. They will never wear out. There is not a spot of dirt on them, and nothing can make them dirty. They are perfect for you." And then the prince said to Jonathan, "Take off your dirty clothes and give them to me." So Jonathan took off his dirty clothes and gave them to the prince, and the prince put them on himself. Next the prince said, "Here, put on my clothes and preach your sermon." Jonathan's hands shook as he put on the prince's beautiful clothes. When Jonathan was dressed, the prince said to the king, "Father, may Jonathan now stand in your presence? He's one of mine." The king was pleased. He said to the prince, "Yes, my son, of course. As long as he wears your clothes, he may stand in front of me." Jonathan was filled with joy. "How can I ever thank you for being so kind to me?" he asked the prince. The prince said, "If you're really thankful, and if you want to show that you love me, then keep all my commandments that I give to you." "Oh, I will," Jonathan said. "I want to be good enough to wear your clothes." "Oh, Jonathan, you cannot be good enough. But you must live your whole life trusting in my goodness while you wear my clothes." On that day, Jonathan preached his best sermon ever, and he spent the rest of his life preaching about the great prince. And he wore the prince's perfect present until the day he died. Grandpa turned to his grandkids, Darby and Campbell, and said, "That's the end of my story. Did you like it?" "Oh, yes," the children replied. "Do you think that if we could find the great prince that he would give us clean clothes too like that?" "Yes," Grandpa said. "He gives clean clothes to everyone who believes in him. But they are not clothes like the ones you ruined today. The great prince gives us new clothes for our heart." Thank you for being with us. The peace of our Lord be with you.